The year is 1998. Two ambitious game developer companies by the names of BioWare and Black Isle Studios came together and created a video game RPG called Baldur's Gate, which was published by Interplay Entertainment, the same publishing company that worked with the Fallout games. Hey, would you look at that? The game would take place in the Forgotten Realms, a fantasy world where many of the popular Dungeons & Dragons modules found their setting. The immediate success of the series would later garner it multiple expansions and spin-offs, some being concerning in terms of quality, but enjoyable nonetheless. I swear I've played through this game like 5 times, but still can't tell if it's good or not. Baldur's Gate 3, The Black Hound, was revealed in 2001 and planned to be the next installment of the series. But Interplay dropped the license to Dungeons & Dragons into a sewer grate and a group of rats working for Atari scraped it up, destroying any chance for the game to see the light of day. It would take nearly 21 years for the third installment of Baldur's Gate to finally come out for early access, killing off around a third of the audience that even remembered the first 2 games. Now, normally this wouldn't be an issue because most game developers push out new releases every few years, just to keep the fan base active and aware of their projects. The Halo series, for instance, has been around almost as long, but has a consistent release schedule with new games appearing every few years. Baldur's Gate stopped breathing for so long that people thought it was dead, but after the burial was over, it crawled out of the dirt like a zombie. Now a new contender appeared to offer the series life support by the name of Larian Studios. They were a rookie game developer / publishing company that appeared in 2014. With all the charisma in the world, they bravely asked the big dogs over at Wizards of the Coast if they could have a crack at designing another game for their dead horse, Baldur's Gate 2. Wizards took a look at their track record and saw that they'd only created one game, Divinity Original Sin, and were still too new at this role-playing game thing to be qualified for the job. Then Larian was all like, "I'll show you, just you wait," and came back 3 years later with their magnum opus, Divinity Original Sin 2. This blew the pointed star-covered hats right off of Wizards, who after all this time, finally agreed to give them the skeletal remains of their once noble steed. The early access of Baldur's Gate 3 was teased a week prior to E3 in 2019, just to get the hype train started. Meanwhile, over at Wizards headquarters, a new Dungeons & Dragons module was in the works, with the hopes of getting their community of tabletop RPG nerds excited about Baldur's Gate again. Now, as previously mentioned, the scope of RPG video games are always huge, and BG3 wasn't an exception. In the words of one journalist, it's currently the size of 75 Baldur's Gate 2s, requiring at least 150 gigabytes of free space to play. This would come as both a blessing and a curse, because with a hyped up audience of boomers who remember the good old days, and zoomers who soiled their pants after hearing someone say D&D 5e but the video game version, expectations were high that this game would deliver. Early access was set to release on the 30th of September 2020, but was later delayed a week for no discernible reason. I can only imagine that someone accidentally deleted the entire game and they had to restart from scratch with a week to spare, but who knows. Eventually, when the game was released to the public, it broke Steam for a while due to the flood of people going to play it. Now, here's a thing to keep in mind. At this point in time, people were just starting to realize that game companies were trying to sell consumers unfinished garbage. Although the main speakers behind Baldur's Gate 3 mentioned that the game would definitely be wonky and unfinished, the full AAA price tag and inherent visual flaws took a few by surprise, me included. Only a fifth of the entire world map was currently finished. Character models ranged from decent to broken to downright creepy. Dead people would spaz out and expand whenever they die. This stone puzzle here would glitch into itself, making solving it impossible. Mage armor would occasionally cause your screen to become a yellow strobe light, and with only a fifth of the content currently available, you'd hope they would have at least made sure the first impression of the game was more stable. Knowing how terrible the first few days of early access were, I waited around a year just to see if anything would be fixed. I mean, it wasn't crashing nearly as often, but for the most part, the obvious issues were still there. At this point, people were just being optimistic, knowing that Larian hadn't pulled the carpet out from under them before with their games, and shrugged it off as an unbaked pie. Give it some more time in the oven and it would be delicious. Up until now, we still can't level up our characters past level 4. So it looks like with Larian's current pace, we can look forward to a full release by 2035. After another 20% of the Baldur's Gate community dies of natural causes, we'll finally have the game we've all been waiting a lifetime for. Now, the newest installment of this video game series is fun to egg on, but I also found the D&D module Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus to be pretty interesting in terms of what players want from the series. A lot of D&D players that I've talked to and heard from agree that the first quarter of the book was absolutely unnecessary. And you know what the entirety of that part comprised? The city of Baldur's Gate. In the story, you have your typical cult up to some trouble and a bunch of hired mercenaries who want you to deal with it. If you bought the book and told your friends that it was going to be an epic, heart-pounding adventure in the pits of hell with war vehicles and devil armies, then they're going to get super let down if you start at the beginning because none of that happens for a while. My colleague Jacob over at XP to Level 3 made a whole video covering this book, and he had a lot of similar grievances with the start of the module that ultimately summarized to:
I don't understand the purpose of this Baldur's Gate part.
Plot elements that go almost nowhere, mundane events that you could realistically find in any D&D book, and a difficulty scaling that is very much not noob-friendly. The city of Baldur's Gate here just doesn't come off as a welcoming book for newcomers. Maybe that's the point, that you're in a dangerous area that won't hesitate to kill you, but I feel like a cult-infested city should still be less dangerous than the literal pits of hell. Also considering that, you know, this is trying to sell more copies of Baldur's Gate 3, and making it really hard might actually not be a great idea for that, but you know, whatever. Now, the last Baldur's Gate game that sort of flew under the radar for a lot of people was Dark Alliance. At first I was confused, because a game called Dark Alliance already existed. It was created 20 years before this new release, running on a lot of the OG consoles back then. But afterwards I realized they just changed the Baldur's Gate part with Dungeons & Dragons, making it a completely different game. Yeah, not really. It's obviously a spiritual successor, and even Wikipedia thinks so. And when has Wikipedia been wrong before? I don't have a lot of personal experience with this game, but just by watching some gameplay footage, I can tell that it has a lot of the same issues that Baldur's Gate 3 has. It's an unfinished, buggy amalgamation. Sure, it might look great, but that doesn't matter because the game also needs to play great. Maybe the community just isn't that outspoken, everyone forgot about the game the second it came out, or I just haven't been in the right circles, but it's odd that I don't hear people complaining all that much. Regardless, it's obvious why these studios are so dead set on continuing this never-ending pursuit for the Baldur's Gate games. At one point, it was a successful IP, and beating the dead horse until it runs dry is safer and more profitable than making something entirely new. Even if the last installment was 21 years ago. Let's not try to end on a sour note though. All of these games have a lot of upsides too. Baldur's Gate 3 is looking to be the most innovative RPG game to date with all of the creative mechanics players will get to mess around with. Even if updates have been slow and a full release date of 2022 seems optimistic at best. Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus is still one of my favorite D&D modules to date. The action-packed Mad Max-styled gameplay is an amazing departure from the typical setup of most campaigns, with the only ironic part being that the intro is super mundane. And people who just enjoy mindlessly stabbing monsters will certainly find Dark Alliance to be fun after all the bugs are worked out. Regardless, we can only hope that whatever company picks up Baldur's Gate next at least polishes their project before releasing it to the public. Because after multiple years of unfinished games coming out from publishers that think people won't notice, the last thing anyone wants is a deadline being the reason their next game resembles a piece of abstract art. The ambition, however, is still astounding. If I had a time machine just so I could play the perfected version of Baldur's Gate 3, I'm sure it would be absolutely incredible. But, you know, I also wouldn't mind if the game devs took a step back and focused on providing the best experience, rather than hoping we'll deal with the issues in the present while they work out all the kinks. It is not a good light to be in when you take everyone's money and offer them a buggy mess in return. Nowadays, early access is synonymous with companies trying to milk their audience and then never fully deliver on anything. And although Baldur's Gate 3 has been receiving updates for the majority of its lifetime, I'm unsure if the intention is just to drop the game after enough people forget about it, finish after a few decades, or somehow release the next 75% of missing content within the next year. All we can do right now is hope that the companies involved will treat the IP with more respect. But as someone who's been a huge fan of Baldur's Gate for more than a decade, you can bet that I won't be buying any more early access content from them anymore. I'm fine replaying Baldur's Gate 2 for now and getting more nightmares from the aboleth in the first room. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.